Hey everyone! In this video I show you the process of my oil painting Trandafira. As inspiration for this painting served the Iele, which are mythological creatures from the Romanian mythology. When I depict women in my art, I love to create characters that are of fairy tale-like beauty, are very powerful and possess magical abilities, often those to enchant and seduce men. To find these kind of personalities, I research myths and folk tales from cultures from around the world. And for this painting, I found the perfect match in the fairies and nymphs from Romania. I don't know much about Romania, but I imagine a country with lots of castles, a very old history going back to the Romans, and lots of ancient deep forests. So inherently very magical. According to folk tales, Iele live in the sky, in forests, caves or on mountain cliffs, and they mostly appear at night by moonlight. Groups of Iele are said to be seen lightly dressed dancing the hora, a traditional dance where they are joining hands and dance in a circle. The place where they had danced would afterwards remain burned, with the grass incapable of growing. Later, when grass would finally grow, it would have a red or dark green color. Animals would not eat it, but instead mushrooms would thrive on it. So Iele are quite a destructive force, but they are not necessarily evil. Their names are secret, so people gave them nicknames, which are very powerful themselves and have to be used extremely careful, since they are, when combined in the right order, the basis for spells and magic used by witches, one of their names being Trandafira, the title of this painting. I just love the history and the folk tale behind this aspect of the Romanian mythology so much. It's incredibly inspiring and so magical. Now let's start with the painting process. As always, I started with a Photoshop composition. I combined a variety of different photos in Photoshop to create an entirely new picture. After having finished my mock-up, I printed it out on paper and transferred it with graphite transfer paper onto my canvas. I used a mix of copper and golden oil paint to underpaint my canvas before I did the transferring. When you paint on a colored background, you don't have to fill in the entire canvas with paint, and you can leave some gaps with the underlying color shining through your painting, which can result in nice effects. For this painting, I started with filling in the black areas of the portrait portion, followed by the dark brown midtones. I always use transparent black, blue or brown tones to mix the dark parts of my paintings. Oftentimes the oil paint already has a transparent character, like ultramarine blue or transparent red-violet, but for more opaque colors like burnt sienna or ivory black, I add some of my oil paint medium, Liquid Original, to the mixed color. This makes it more transparent, less opaque and more fluid. Most of my oil paints are too thick to paint with them anyways, so I have to use either safflower oil or oil paint medium to change the consistency so that I am able to paint properly with the paints. By the way, all materials that I used to create this oil painting are listed below in the video description. And if you're looking for a straightforward, easy to follow, step-by-step oil painting lesson, check out my 1 hour and 40 minutes long real-time painting lesson that I created extra for this painting. The lesson shows you how to paint a portrait with my method, which is also applicable for almost everything else that you can paint with oils. To watch the lesson, support me on Patreon at the $5 reward tier. This reward level also gives you access to all my other painting lessons and tutorials. And I've created over 70 painting tutorials so far. You can also choose to support me at the $10 reward tier, which gives you access to several hour-long full painting process videos of almost all my recent watercolor, mixed media and oil paintings. Visit my website at lioba.info to see a list of all painting videos available. There are so many goodies that I have prepared for my patrons, one of them being my monthly art surprises. Each month I choose my best paintings and illustrations and turn them into a set of beautiful postcards, stickers and magnets that I send out to my patrons every single month. Once they are gone, you can't get them anywhere else, so don't miss out on them. Get your own personal art surprise package too on patreon.com patreon.com/Lioba Brückner for just $5 more. Back to the painting process. To establish the darker parts of the portrait, I mix burnt sienna, raw umber and ivory black to mimic the right color value and tone. I started with a rather large, flat brush for the bigger shadow areas, and then I switched to a smaller brush to work on the highlights on her eyes. Since we as human viewers pay so much attention to the expression of eyes, I always make sure to put a lot of work into painting the eyes. To make sure to paint them evenly, I work on both eyes simultaneously. Eyelids, waterline and lashes for me are the difficult parts of an eye, and I need room for corrections. So if I don't get it right in the first layer, I just let it dry and then come back to it in the following painting sessions. The next step is filling in the remaining parts of the face with the midtones. For that, I switch back to the larger sized flat brush again and mix a skin tone with Naples Yellow Warm from Sennelier. This color, although not necessary for mixing skin tones, can be really helpful to save time because it already has a nice light tone resembling a lighter complexion. Otherwise, you can also use yellow ochre, cadmium red light, burnt sienna and titanium white to achieve a similar color. For smaller areas in her face, like the nose, I switch back to smaller brushes in order to be able to paint smaller details like nostrils. When painting details for a painting medium, I recommend using oil, for example safflower oil, instead of mineral spirits like Gamsol. I made the experience that paint thinner, even the tiniest amount of it, although helps keeping your brush clean, tends to dissolve the paint on your canvas too, and when you paint details, the effect is pretty strong. Oil doesn't do that, and all the detail work is preserved on your canvas. But you won't be able to clean your brushes easily. Something always has to give. After having finished the face, I continued working on her hands, using the same technique that I applied when painting the portrait portion. The difference is that I started with the contours of the hands. Oftentimes, they are the darkest parts of a hand, but furthermore, they help to keep their shape together while painting. Hands are of such complicated shapes and form that it is easy to confuse them and mess them up during the painting process. I like to start with the most complicated parts first, like the fingers and the fingernails, and then continue with the back of the hand and the arm. This way I can reserve a lot of my ability to concentrate for the beginning of the painting process and can be a bit more relaxed when proceeding with the process. Then I worked on the intricate pattern on her gown. For my composition, I intentionally chose ornamentation and colors that I felt fit the Eastern European traditional folklore clothing. I decided to paint this part of my motif in an illustrative and simplified manner, creating an interesting contrast to the realistic portions of my painting. Being in line with the traditional color scheme, I chose bold colors and sets of 3 to make an appealing composition for my artworks. 3 blue butterflies are accompanied by 3 yellow lilies. I have different painting techniques for different things that I paint. The way how I paint faces, for example, is useful for almost everything, but painting fur, flowers and butterflies require a different painting technique. For these types of objects, I follow the dynamics of the shape, like the lily flower petal, for example, and create detail with only a couple of brush strokes. I start with a red area in the middle of every lily flower, and then I draw a yellow stroke from the border of a lily petal to the center of it. This way you get a natural blending from the yellow to the red, mimicking the natural coloring of the flower petal in a very effective and time-saving way. Then, in the following painting session, I added a second layer on the portrait portion. I used this layer to refine and smooth the skin and enhance highlights. I added a complete layer of a light skin tone on her cheeks because my first layer of paint wasn't opaque enough. I also added more middle tones and blended these smoothly into the highlights. I also worked on her eyes to get rid of any unevenness of the eyes and the irises. I also enhanced the intensity of her bright blue eyes with mixing cobalt turquoise and Sèvres blue. In the next step, I added all the black parts of my painting, including the washes, where I pour diluted oil paint over my canvas. In order to get this watercolory consistency, I mixed my paint with a lot of Gamsol. Then I let everything dry. To finish my painting, I added translucent layers on some parts of the composition to bring everything together. And I also added small blades of grass into the black areas to make them look more intricate and detailed. This painting took me about a week to finish, without taking the drying times into account. My process here is oftentimes like the following. I paint for a couple of days until I have filled in everything, then I let my painting dry, and then I do other things the next days until I can continue working on my piece again. So it takes me probably 2 weeks to finish this kind of painting. I really like how Trandafira turned out, especially the intense look in her eyes. If you like her too, you can get a limited edition fine art print of her in my online shop. I offer the basic and the embellished version, which I overpaint personally and embellish with different kinds of glitter. The edition size is limited to only 50, and once they are gone forever. So follow the link in the video description and get yourself a print too. I hope you enjoyed the painting process and the video. If you did, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next one. Bye bye!